and action. Yeah, great. So do you want me to, is this, we're away? You had me on an angle last time, didn't you? Did we?
Yes, you slowly...
I came squared up, naturally squared up to the camera.
That's good.
So we're starting?
Yes.
Great. So I grew up in the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand. I grew up in Auckland, in a little place called Bucklands Beach. We're actually just up the road from Bucklands Beach in a place called Sorrel Crescent. I won't give you the number, but we used to go down, I spent all my childhood on the beach, sailing, hanging out. Without giving too much away, it was a pretty hectic childhood. I had a lot of stuff that I needed to deal with and overcome. And I believe we sign up for this stuff. I totally believe in reincarnation. I believe that we come into this time, I've incarnated in this lifetime for things I had to learn, and I gave myself a lot of challenges, which was great. And so, at about the age of 14, school, I really was at school just to bounce basketballs. That was it. I was a basketball player. I just wanted to play basketball. There was no other reason. I didn't like school. I thought it was a waste of time. I liked English. I liked getting lost in my imagination, but really, I thought school was a complete waste of time. And I remember at the age of 14, I bought a crash-up derby car, a stock car. It's called a Velix Vauxhall. It cost me 150 bucks. And there were a few things that happened in my life. There's a few big things that really sort of were heartbreaking, and they triggered me into just leaving home and school at the age of 14. I went and lived in a caravan. So I put a lot on my shoulders, right? I had to save the planet. That was basically it. So, I mean, there's a lot more going on there, obviously, that I learned later on in therapy. But, this is where I was at. And I was working in a construction site during the day, and at night I would dance. I would go and do modern jazz, I'd do ballet, I'd do hip hop, and I loved that. That was my release. Dancing was my release. And I was also in a band called the Virgin Silkworms, and I played the bass. And we were a garage band, you know what I mean? We toured the neighbourhood. But we only went a couple of streets, that's as far as we got. And we never got a label, we never got picked up. But in our little bubble, we were good. And we had some rockin' garage concerts. And the bass was great because we were covering this is the 80s. So we're covering like The Cure and all these other bands. And the bass was this dum 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 dum. Anybody could do that. So I was living my own little rock star world playing bass. So one day I decided this was it, you know what I mean? The world has to change. I really had this strong dislike and anger towards the world around capitalism. I just didn't understand it. I kind of looked at the world and thought, whose idea was this? This is a train crash waiting to happen. This is going nowhere. It doesn't make any sense. You can't keep going down this track without it not working. And it was all up to me. And I'd given myself a character name. My name was Torch Striker. That was my name. That was my superhero name. And this was the guy that was going to change the planet. So I got in my stock car. I had my blue suede winkle pickers on that I had specially made because I loved Elvis, totally loved Elvis. And I'd been driving around in this car and I just got my license, and I'd been driving since I was about 14. And then I got my license when I was 15, as you did back there in New Zealand. And I would drive around and it wasn't legal. And the cops would see me and they'd pull me over. And I had this big cassette deck player sitting on I'd sort of screwed it into the dash. And then I had a steel stake beside it. I had 2 stereo speakers in the back seat. I'd be listening to Billy Idol, I'd be listening to Elvis, full pelt. I'd just be driving around. The cops would pull me over and go, the car's not legal, son, you're aware of that? I say, yes. So they give me a ticket, and in front of them, on the steel spike, I just smash the ticket down on the spike. I keep doing that, and they keep pulling me over, and I keep smashing it down on the spike until I had this plethora of tickets that high, and then I just, put them in the glove box and I'd start again. And I would see the police officers, they would see me coming and they'd have a little joke between themselves. They'd go, there's that mad young idiot in that car. Look at him. He's a write-off. And then they'd pull me over, give me a ticket, bang. So it was getting to a point where I was getting a lot of warrants. You know what I mean? I was getting warrants because I wasn't paying the fines. The warrants were coming to my house. So I went out one day and I said, this is the day. I jigged myself up. This is the day I was going to save the world. So I went out and I tried to smash down some traffic lights. It's not as easy to smash down traffic lights as you think. I kind of thought I was just going to mow them down. A little bit more difficult than that. I managed to get one, kind of, and that was it. But, in the process of doing that, it really sort of heated things up. Basically, the cops knocked on the front door, I went out the back door. I went down and pawned my blue suede winkle pickers, my most treasured possession, got enough money, jumped on a plane, and I went to Australia. I landed in Australia with $50 in the cross. It was a big city. I'd never been to such a big city before in my life. And back then what you needed to do was go and see a certain gentleman, Maori Paul, down in the Bondi Hotel. So I went to see him. He got me stoned, then took me up to the CES, at the time it was called that I think, and we got on the dole, and I was in heaven. So I was a young kid, living in Australia. I had some cash coming in. I was feeling quite happy. And I went down to Bondi Beach and thought, this is life. Things, quickly sort of spiraled out of control. I had a few jobs, but I couldn't keep them. It was hard getting money. I didn't know anybody. And I remember, I think, at that time, everything that happened to me sort of cascaded to a point where I was in a deep, deep depression. I wasn't aware of it at that time. All I knew is that I used to, in the old days, they had those red rattlers. I used to just sit in the old red rattler train and I'd just go on all the train lines all around Sydney, all around Sydney. Just really, really unhappy, but not being able to even pinpoint or regulate my feelings or know what that was connected to. All I knew that is I just felt awful. I felt terrible and I couldn't shake it. And I remember one day I sort of caught a train and we got out to Lithgow in the Blue Mountains and there was no more further that you could go. And so I got on the road and I started hitching. This guy picked me up, this couple picked me up, and they'd had a squat house in Bathurst they'd been squatting in. They said, oh, we're just moving out of there, but we're going out to pick up the mattress and stuff and a few things. Actually, you can keep the mattress, we don't need it, we were just going to chuck it. We can drop you off there, would you like to go there? This is after I'd had a conversation with them and said that I had nowhere to live and I was just cruising around. So they took me to this little squat and I stayed there, which I loved. I had my own little house. I had somewhere to live. And then I couldn't eat, I had no food. So I remember going down to the supermarket and just sort of getting a bag load of stuff and then just, hurdling the turnstile and just running out of there at 100 miles an hour, not paying for anything. And as I was walking back to my little squat, I came across this car yard. And in this car yard was this beautiful VW Porsche. So the VW with a Porsche kit, right, back then. And it had been done up, had a little whale tail on it, had Simmons mags, it was black. It looked like a complete racing car. I'd just never seen anything like it in my life. I was just drawn to it. So I went over and I was just looking at it through the fence. And the car salesman comes up to me and he goes, how you going? And we started a conversation. Before I knew it, I'd sort of said I'm just moving into town and I was looking to buy a car. Really, I was just trying to have a conversation without having a conversation. And before I knew it, I sort of got myself into a corner that I couldn't get out of. And so it was a beautiful car. The guy the guy that built it had raced cars at Bathurst. So it was a full, racing VW, if you can call it, if there is such a thing. And, he said, would you like to go for a drive? And obviously I wasn't doing nothing with my life at that point. So I thought, yeah, why not? I'll go for a drive in this cool car. So he pulls it up beside me and I jump into the driver's seat and he says, off you go, just go around for a little cruise and come back. And I said, what, you're not coming with me? And he said, no, you're all right, just go for a cruise around the streets. And I thought, this is great. I'm gonna go for a cruise around the streets. So I jumped in the car And I'm just driving this car around. It's got these beautiful black bucket seats. It's got this little short shift gearbox, this beautiful racing steering wheel, all these dials and everything on it. It felt fantastic. It was great. And then I turned on the radio, and this Beverly Hills Cops song came on. I don't know if you remember it. It went something like this. Dun, 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 dun. And at that moment, something switched in my brain. And I disappeared into this movie, right? And I was still in the car. So I drove this car. I drove it hardcore, as far out along these bitumen roads into the country as I could, till I saw this little thing under a bridge, and I went and parked under there. I'm in full movie mode. I've just gone, right? Something's just clicked in my brain. I've disappeared into fantasy land. So I've got a whole lot of branches, and I've covered up, all these branches and stuff, and I've covered up the whole VW. I've found this little Coca-Cola can top, and I've started scratching off because it had big painted on the windscreen. I think it was 15,990 or 16,990 or whatever it was. I'm scratching that off the windscreen, right? And then I'm just waiting until it was dark. As soon as the sun's gone down, I've gone, it's time.